Andrew Knight, and I'm the Acquisitions and Content Services Manager at Imperial College London. I think it's a tradition to sort of introduce your institution. I think most of you have heard of Imperial, I hope so anyway, after you work there. But we are quite unusual, and as Karen said, completely opposite, really. We're about 20,000 students, but 50% of those are postgraduate, roughly divided into half postgraduate talk and half postgraduate research. And we're STEM-based, so science, technology, engineering, medicine, business. So our profile is quite unusual, and the reason I bring that up is quite relevant in the context of metadata, us being very much research-driven. And I think when you're doing the kind of research that goes on in Imperial, accuracy of records becomes hugely important. I was looking up the other day, we've actually been working with BDS since the summer of 2001, so we were reasonably early adopters as well. It's not just me, Jenny May, who is our metadata coordinator for Imperial. So she, I, and Heather and the team at BDS have been working together since then, really to come up with something that was a bit more reliable, maybe a bit more streamlined metadata workflow that we looked at back in the day, that would fit into the existing acquisitions process that we have. We've spent a lot of time developing at Imperial. And it's probably worth pointing out we're an Alma customer, that we pretty much own by Ex Libris. And any of you who've worked with Ex Libris, sometimes get the challenge to get them on board with your development, but we did. And actually we've just finished our third year of the contract, we're going to our fourth year. And to give you a bit of context, we get roughly somewhere between 11 and 12,000 records from BDS a year. So it's quite a big operation. But if we go back to that time, 2021, something like that, I thought it'd be worth me talking to you guys about what we really wanted to achieve when we started looking at BDS products. And really it was four quite straightforward things. We wanted to improve the overall quality of our records. We wanted to get hold of a consistent service that we wouldn't have to do a lot of checking with. We wanted to make sure that as many records as possible came through that one particular process, and we wanted it to be really streamlined. And by that I mean it had to integrate with what we were doing already, so that we weren't going out with the process that we'd already developed. So I'll go through these in a little bit more detail, one by one. So as I said, I think probably the main driver for us becoming early adopters, and probably the reason we've carried on subscribing since then, was simply just to improve the quality of the records we had coming in. I think many people here would disagree that some of the vendor supplied metadata is not always the best. And when we looked at that, we thought, well, actually, there's a kind of knock-on effect down the line for that. Not just for your teams, who have to do lots of work to amend and check and augment them, but also for your users. And I'll keep coming back to that stage. Like, we always thinking, well, the discoverability of our material is so important. We spend a lot of money buying it, so it needs to be visible. We're almost completely reliant on shelf ready. Imperial's quite a big institution. It's a bit of a mad institution, so the more standardised, the better. But our team is quite small, and the amount of throughput that we have is quite big. So I wanted to develop a workflow that was centred around what I call quality assurance rather than quality control. That being, if you design a system that eliminates any chance of mistakes happening, that's much more efficient than designing a system that lets them happen and then stops them and corrects them later on. You'll end up in the same place, but one's much more efficient than the other. So the last thing to say on that is that when we set up with BDS, the licence agrees a high standard mark record. So we know we're going to be getting that for every single order that we make. And we don't need to do any checking at all. No one looks at the records, they just come in automatically. So that's about quality. Now what about consistency? And we thought that some of the records we were getting in, pandemic, pre-pandemic, apart from being of generally poor quality, they're all slightly different because they come from so many different sources. And when you have that, as has been mentioned today, the standardisation of records requires a huge amount of work from your teams to get them tidied up. Whereas with UniCat, we've been able to replace multiple sources of records with one main supplier. And it covers these things. It's all over the orders, print and ebooks, and audiobooks, particularly through Overdrive there. We've got a couple of DDAs running and an EBA this year. Lots and lots of individual titles from our ebook packages. We've got an e-textbook program of about 180 titles, I'm going to say, so all of those. Then there's sort of general cataloguing things too, that you want to do upgrades, so we've got limited donations where we can. And other little different projects, like Jenny's working on a big reclassification project at the moment, it's sort of helped there. And the idea is that all of these things, really, really different resources, the benefit for us has been a huge amount of saved time. Because if you think, if you're checking all of these things manually one by one, that time is obviously going to add up quite a lot. So we've been able to really get everything that we do within one process. Which is this, like the coverage is really good. We wanted a product that would deliver records from as much content as possible into one, I guess, standardised or centralised process. And UniCat does the vast majority of that. More than 9 out of 10 of our title-by-title purchases, and as has been mentioned, things that are post-2010 or come from a publisher that BDS has a relationship with, they are automatically ingested into our system. If not, we get little notifications say they can't do it, and those remaining titles we choose to catalogue in-house. We could get those from a supplier, but obviously that would cost us. And it's quite nice to get our cataloguers, you know, keeping their hand in. But on top of that, I think one of the real benefits has been the access to the BDS database. It's allowed us to do a few different extra things. We buy actually quite a large number of ebook packages, some of the big science packages, and previously we were using records from Hammer's Community Zone. Again, anyone who goes to Hammer here will know that Community Zone records are
same space,
we'll just edit that bit out there.
It's an experience, isn't it?
Yeah. Whereas with UniCat we're able to upgrade those. It sends an automated report, returns any matching records that overlay the Community Zone records. So we know that the ones we've got for the individual titles within our packages are enhanced records. We do a similar sort of thing. You can request batches of records. That's kind of useful when you buy an ebook package that maybe isn't in the Community Zone at all. So it's a very similar sort of workflow. We send a list of ISBNs or URLs, whatever it is, to BDS, and they'll just send back the matching records. It's the same thing, it's just a more manual way of doing it. We have used it for print as well. And the last thing is using the BDS database, just with normal copy cataloguing, even stuff that I can do. I haven't done it for a while, nearly, but it's just an extra database that you can use. And the sort of last thing that we wanted to do, that we wanted to achieve, was around streamlining, which is a big watchword at Imperial. Like I said, we've got quite a small team, so it's very important. And a real victory for us here has been completely eliminating cataloguing checks. We know they're time consuming, and if they're time consuming, they are therefore expensive. And I think if you're bothered about having accurate records, it's going to tie up a lot of your resources and your time. So as already mentioned, we get records arrived part of shelf ready, and we don't have to check them at all. So I said less than 10% required any kind of attention. It's actually really important for us because pre-COVID, and this came up earlier, we used to do everything centrally. All of our print books, for example, would come into the central library, and we would receive them, and we would catalogue them, and we would do all the things to. And then they would go out to our sister lab. We've got 8 campus libraries. And then during COVID, obviously that stopped for, obviously we didn't want double handling of things, and also quite often there was no one in the central library. And then when COVID went away, we decided actually that was quite an efficient system, wasn't it, to send things directly to the campuses. We realised it was saving us tons of time. Books were getting to the campuses much quicker. But the only downside was that we were having staff at the mainly hospital campuses who have no cataloguing experience at all. So we thought, well, actually, it doesn't matter because if we're getting this stuff done centrally, they don't need to do any cataloguing. They don't need to have training, or they don't need to have a huge amount of extra upskilling. They'll just do receiving. So that was kind of useful. And to be honest with you, like that saved time, even if you are an expert cataloguer, the workflow is kind of useful. What we wanted to do was to have as little book in hand checking as necessary, because that's obviously the thing that you need to be trained on. This is my version of Sue's. So for the lay people amongst us, it's a fully automated workflow. As I said, we use Alma as our LMS. The steps are fairly straightforward, or at least they were in my diagram. I would suggest having a check with Jenny if you want any more detailed information. Probably not the person to ask. But essentially, what we do is we place an order in Alma, and it generates a scratch record. The report is sent to BDS every day with the details of all the orders that have been made that day. And that report tells them one of three things. It says, can you send us an existing record? Or it says, can you create a record if you don't have it already in your database and it's in scope? Or it says, can you notify us that you can't send the record this time and we'll do it in-house? And then what Sue was talking about, the second invoice report goes from Alma, and what that does, it confirms that the order has been fulfilled. And once that's happened, BDS then send us the record via FTP. And Alma's able to match that incoming BDS marked record against the MMS ID, which is the kind of record identifier in Alma, something like that. And because it arrives a little bit after the order was placed, we know that the BDS record will overlay the scratch record, so that we know the enhanced high quality record is going to be the one that stays in the pre-run, which is our discovery layer. It might be helpful just to point out that it's completely vendor neutral, so it doesn't matter what you're ordering, as long as the order's gone in Alma. It doesn't matter which supplier that you're actually ordering from, which is quite nice because we have a few that we use for different things. So that was kind of what we wanted to do, and this is the bit where I say, did it work? I'm pleased to say that yes, pretty much it did. There are several benefits. Primarily, and I don't mind repeating myself on this, we have one source of metadata, and it's guaranteed to be an agreed standard that we set up with BDS when we started the license. And the reason we do that is that we, as librarians, generally agree that that does help a discovery, that's going to help our students and researchers. That's the whole point of us having a catalogue in the first place. Where we do have stuff in common with UAL is around the time that it frees us up to do other things. There's no point getting your cataloguers to do very, very basic cataloguing, day-to-day cataloguing, when it can be done elsewhere. You can free their time up to do, dare I say, more interesting things outside of the routine. We can trust the data that's coming in, and we've now been able, in fact, I sort of restructured the team a couple of years ago because they don't have to do cataloguing that much anymore. They are now acquisitions and metadata systems, and they do loads and loads of other different tasks. So from that point of view, it completely transformed the way that I was able to get the team to work. The other thing I was talking at lunch about is, you have these projects where the priority is kind of down here. So you think, when are we going to get around to doing that? The answer is probably never, because it's just not important enough. Because if your time is being taken up by doing this kind of day-to-day stuff, you'll never get the time to address things like your classification or your special collections. And now we've been able to do that. It's sped up some of those projects a little bit, and we've got people working on them, not wasting their time doing things that can be done outsourced. The other big win was around ebook package records. When we first started getting out ebook packages, the metadata within them was not good. And I would extend this to open access material as well, which is something I'll talk about in a minute. Going through hundreds and hundreds of titles within a big ebook package is boring and it's pointless. And they cost loads of money. We were sort of under the impression no one's really able to find these things. So that's been a really big benefit for us, given the financial outlay we have on ebook packages. Anyway, the last thing I'm going to talk about, please know, is just what we want to do in the future. I guess for those of you who don't have BDS here, this might be of interest to you. Primarily, we want to carry on improving or maintaining the quality of the metadata we have, particularly around those packages. and particularly around open access titles. I don't know if loads of you here have got tons of OA stuff in your catalogue. It's a real mess. It takes up loads of room, and some of it's very, very low quality. So we'd like to look at that and see if we can get that tidied up a little bit. We continue to buy these massive packages from the publishers. You want one book, but you have to buy 200 of them, and the metadata is rubbish. It's like, can we sort that out? I always end up doing stuff like that. The next thing really is just looking at the cost benefit, and again, it's easy to measure things in how much is that. What's the cost per record of what we're paying BDS? And I think that's a slightly naive attitude to take towards cost benefit. And some of these points have been made already, so it's interesting that other people are thinking it. No one's ever said to me that, Andrew, what is the cost benefit of BDS? No one's ever asked me that. And we'll be getting a new director next week, so that might change. But I think if I answer that question, I'm not just going to say, well, it costs how many pence per record. It's around the potential savings we've made in staff time by not having to do all the kind of checking and correcting and all the rest of the different records. Secondly, the cost of time spent helping students who can't find things in our catalogue. I think it was on the slides earlier. It's massive. A waste of time. Like if your catalogue is accurate and full of good visible records, that whatever 15% of the time it was of the help desk of trying to help students find things is eliminated. And the third thing really is just this completely streamlined process we have. When we order books, we don't then have to go off the beaten track and do a bit and then join it on later. It's just one throughput. We never even see it. All of this stuff happens in the background, so we know that when you order a book, the acquisition is processed. It's a singular thing. You press order and all the stuff happens in the background. Beyond all of that, financial terms, it's around the student experience, right? Everything we do has to be around that. We spend, I don't even tell you how much money buying these books a year. And if you haven't optimised them in your discovery layers, it's literally a waste of money. I mean, this stuff has to be visible, it has to be optimised for discovery. That's why students are coming to Imperial, because we're able to get hold of these resources. What's the point of hiding them on a catalogue? The very, very last thing I would say about cost benefit is all of our cataloguing costs are now entirely predictable. We have a little budget for it, we give it to BDS and we'll do a little bit of that, and we have no worries about what is it going to be more or the rest of it, it's just there. I'll stay now. I thought I'd just bring this up. I think the sector is still crying out for this kind of single reliable source of metadata, create kind of nationally agreed standards. It's a really difficult thing to do and it's taken a long time to get there. What I would say, UniCat is not designed to solve that issue yet, anyway, I don't think. But what it does do, or what I've learned over the last 3 or 4 years, what UniCat does do, it proves that there's sort of room within the sector for different approaches to metadata. I think the way that metadata is handled and shared, and different institutions will look at those different approaches, and some will want to do it as cheaply as possible. They don't care about the quality of metadata. They just say, I just want it for free. Some will want to do something a bit more like us, maybe streamline their processes, get higher quality. Whatever it is, we're all looking for those solutions. And the reason we're doing that, and the reason we attach importance to metadata, the quality of consistent metadata, is because we want our users to find and access those high quality things that we buy. I don't have anything else to say. Thank you very much.